This show and all the content on All About Beer is able to come to you each week, thanks to the companies that support our journalism through advertising. If your company is thinking about 2023 media plans, we have options for every budget. Email info@allaboutbeer.com to learn more. And thanks for the support in keeping us on air and online. Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl, and it's a Canadian-focused episode this week with Matt Tweedy, the co-founder and director of brewing at Tooth and Nail Brewing in Ottawa. From judging insights to Belgian-inspired ales, food pairing, and seasonals, we'll get into it all. But first, All About Beer is back online and producing original content for beer enthusiasts and professionals. Visit allaboutbeer.com to see the latest. And if you want to support us in that endeavor, we've set up a Patreon for both readers and professional companies in the beer space. You can check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer to learn more. And for more audio content, search All About Beer on your podcast platform of choice and listen to the shows that are now available, including Brewer to Brewer, Beer Travelers, and the All About Beer podcast. We're able to bring you this show each week, thanks to the companies that support independent journalism in the beer space. You can learn more about our surprisingly affordable rates by emailing info@allaboutbeer.com. And speaking of that, this episode is brought to you by Pro Brewer. We bring original articles to probrewer.com twice a week, covering issues that are important to the beer industry and aimed at helping breweries of all sizes understand different facets of the business. Check out our articles on probrewer.com every Tuesday and Thursday, and visit the site daily for other original content and to stay connected with the beer industry. Last month, I was in Toronto as a judge for the inaugural Canada Beer Cup. Over the course of 3 very, very long days, I was seated across from Matt Tweedy, the co-founder and brewing director of Tooth and Nail Brewing in Ottawa. By the lunch break on the first day, I knew he needed to be on the show. Aside from having a great palate and brewing insight, he's a thoughtful guy who genuinely cares about the beers he's making and the overall direction of brewing, not only in Canada, but globally. Before opening the doors of his brewpub, he learned from some of the very best on the planet, including stints at Cantillon, Fuller's, and the Lost Abbey. Those experiences continue to shape his beer today and help with the overall education and flavor experience that patrons get every time they open up one of his beers or step into the bar. There is a lot of ground to cover, so let's get into it. Here's our conversation. As we get to the end of 2022, how would you describe the state of Canadian beer from your perspective as a brewer?
It's a great question because we've really as this industry has proven in any country, really. I mean, it's just a wild ride. The last 10 years of brewing in Canada and Ontario, the province I live in. I mean, the degrees of understanding and quality have just had exponential growth, as well as the number of breweries. So I think, I would have to probably assume that there's some reflection in the US of this as well. But while the quality and attention to detail has increased dramatically, and I'm seriously proud of the beers that we have to offer from Canada right now. With that comes, of course, maybe too many breweries here and there, and a lot of cash grabs that probably aren't grabbing much cash anymore. But with the great quality comes some poor quality as well. I think that would be the same in any industry, really. And I think we've never made better beer in Canada than we're making right now. And whereas there used to be a small handful of breweries where I would just be like, well, that's what I'm drinking, because I can depend on it. That handful has grown into, a big bucket full, a barrel full, whatever you want to call it.
Mash tun full,
mash tun full of great beers, and from coast to coast as well. Even in Alberta, whereas I haven't really had the fortune to try too many of the Albertan beers. I mean, there's a lot of word on the street, and a lot of discussion going around how good those beers have become. So it's encouraging for sure. It's a pretty awkward time right now in the beer industry, but at least we're pumping out some good products.
Awkward how?
Awkward just at the coming out or clawing out of this last couple of years, and some of the fallouts that are anticipated, the struggles that a lot of small breweries are still facing and will probably be facing for a little while now to come. And there seems to be a lot of sales and mergers and acquisitions that are kind of starting, with a lot of discussion around that just starting, and to anticipate quite a bit more of that stuff. It's not an easy gig right now running a brewery. It's never been easy so much, but we opened Tooth and Nail in 2015, and pretty fortunate to have opened at kind of a really high time for consumers, and a lot of buzz around locally made beer. So you kind of hit the ground running. Now we're just trying to kind of crawl out of a hole a little bit.
What first attracted you to get into the beer industry?
Great question. It was, so there's a degree of it that found me, a large degree of it that found me. And I think it was always there. I went to school in a small town, university in a small town called Lennoxville, Quebec, where there's a pretty, let's say, active partying group of people going to this university. There's a small town. There were a couple of bars, and a lot of kids, wanting to seriously have a lot of fun. And one of those bars, one of the two main bars really, was a brew pub. And I ended up getting a job spinning the tunes as a DJ, like one night a week or two nights a week. I can't remember that far back. And I got paid $40 cash and 2 pitchers of the house-made beer. And the second I started drinking that, nobody would buy the house-made beer. I mean, people were still buying Molson and Labatt bottles, and that was the big thing. But I just instantly was just amazed the depth of flavor of this beer, and I would order different pitchers that they made every night. And looking back on it now, the quality probably wasn't fantastic, but to me it was eye-opening. And then from that moment on, I was always like, didn't matter what bar I was in or where I was always looking for the alternative. And I was a ski bum in BC for 5 years, always drinking the local beer there. And I came back to Ontario pretty clueless as to what to do with myself. And I was going to be an urban planner. I was going to be a teacher. I was going to do all these things. And I got a job working at Beer Bistro in Toronto. I wanted to get out of the serving industry, but I thought, well, I still have to do this. I was taking some geography courses at night, and I still have to do this job to get myself through school and whatnot. So I might as well do it at a beer place and learn something. And lo and behold, my first day of training there was with Stephen Beaumont. And, it just instantly, like without even thinking about it, just sparked this real passion that, it turned kind of like an interest into an immediate passion. And still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with myself. And, I still remember the day I was sitting with 2 friends on a deck looking out over the water in Ottawa, and I was pretty bummed out. I said, I don't know what to do with myself. And one of my friends said, well, look, you're a really good skier, and that doesn't seem to be panning out for you. And you really love beer. So, why don't you be a brewer? And, growing up in high school, it's not exactly on the list of job options.
Yeah, there's not a lot of guidance counselors that are steering. Yeah.
No. In fact, they were probably trying to steer me away from it at that time. And it took me 2 seconds, and I was kind of like, well, who does that? How do you do that? And I'm looking at the beer in my hand, and I was like, well, people do this. So let's figure this out. And I remember I wouldn't even tell my parents. I think I was about 32 or 33 at the time. I wouldn't even tell my parents that this was my pursuit. because there was nobody who was going to be able to tell me that you can't do that, or this isn't a good idea, or it's really risky or anything. That was just the second I made that choice, it was head down, make it happen. And, I was lucky at the time through the Beer Bistro connections. I was able to go to various places in the world and do some quick stages, for lack of a better word.
I like how humble you are about that, of just you got to go to a couple of places. Like you went to the places.
Yeah, I guess I did. Yeah, it was pretty cool for sure. But keep in mind, at the time, I didn't really know anything aside from having read, a Ray Daniels book or whoever. I was still so in my infancy that, of course, I wanted to go to the cool places. They were probably the only places I had really heard of.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time, and even though from going to those breweries, I learned what mashing in looks like. I learned what cleaning a tank looks like. I, discussed hops and malts with people and things like that. But I didn't really learn how to brew at any of them. But it was more, I think the foundations of shaping my outlook and shaping my style and shaping, what it was that I wanted to express and how I wanted to do that.
Well, when we're talking about like Cantillon, or when we're talking about the Lost Abbey, like mashing in on those systems is different from like a more commercial brewery. And I can't imagine replicating that anywhere else, because those are, I don't use the word often, but they are unique and they are singular to themselves. Just to name two places. But it's those sort of intangibles aside from the equipment, of which at least I know the one at Cantillon is like OSHA violations of, occupational health and safety violations, which I don't really seem to care about in Belgium.
No.
But, I imagine your system is different these days, but those intangibles and walking away with, I imagine, a sense of awe and a sense of respect for process and time and tradition. But what else? What else do you get from those experiences, or did you get from those experiences?
There's, those experiences. When I say that, in looking back, as I mentioned, I didn't really know a whole lot at that point. I knew more than the average beer drinker and maybe some home brewers and things like that. But I say it shaped me, and it's almost like a subconscious development that goes on. You mentioned process. Process to me is so important, and I probably took that mostly from Tommy Arthur, also watching at Cantillon, but even spending a week at Fuller's and waking up at 3:30 in the morning to get there for a mash in. You're going into a tiny little bunker and staring at a computer with schematic drawings, but you're watching the process really happen. And I think for me, one of the things I value the most is process and understanding process, and then trying to maybe change that understanding and be somewhat innovative in that process. And when I talk about innovation, I don't believe that you can really innovate without fully understanding, the history and fully understanding what got you to the point where you want to make that innovation. And sometimes innovation in today's world is actually just stepping back 50 years and trying what they used to do, because nobody seems to be so interested in anymore.
Do you find your sorry
no go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you found yourself, I hear that as a complaint quite a bit of, today's beer drinkers don't know, or today's brewers, are only thinking about, what comes next, as opposed to, the future or what's trendy now. And I know
That's
that
pretty risky. You know, I think that's pretty risky. I think we stand to lose a lot if that's the trajectory forward.
Do you see that happening?
I do. Yeah, I see it happening all over the place. And you know, I think we have to be very careful with that. First of all, I remember when I first kind of started dreaming up ideas of what I wanted to do with this, you know, thing that was blowing up inside of me. I was thinking, wouldn't it be great to be very, very, excuse me, you know, Belgian-like, and not brew to style, not brew IPAs, not brew stouts, and you know, whatever you want to call it, to style beer.
Yeah.
And I had an idea that I would, you know, maybe open a brew pub or a diner or something, and every beer was designed for a dish. And I've had those opportunities before, and they're extremely rewarding, but it's not really a sustainable business model. But you have to, I don't think you can really go that route without understanding, you know, what got you there in the first place. I mean, I bring up the name Michael Jackson to a lot of people in my brew pub, and they look at me like I'm, you know, on acid. Like I don't even know what I'm talking. Like, who's Michael Jackson? Like, what does he have to do with beer?
Right.
You know, and I think that's tragic. I think that there's so much literature that, first of all, is the way that literature is written is fascinating. Let alone, you know, really sparks a lot of creativity, and a lot of innovation, if you were. And I just, you know, I find it sad that that's kind of, people are just starting to learn about beer on Instagram. And I know you hear about that a lot, and it
Sure
seems like a cliche, but it is true. And yeah, I am concerned about you know, we're starting to almost get back into a macro brew type scenario of, you know, the 60s and 50s and maybe the early 70s, where there was really one kind of beer and it's a different brand was slapped on it. And I get concerned that we're heading back in that direction.
But with IPA, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, IPA as a category itself, you know, you could almost classify beer as beer, and it's got, you know, 95 different, you know, styles or categories, and then IPA being a separate drink altogether.
Yeah.
Like,
So I want to jump back just a little bit, because when you're talking about this, you know, this idea growing inside of you and sort of wanting to burst out a little bit, I'm always interested in the entrepreneurial spirit where that clicks for people, because there are, you know, there's some people who just know that they want to build something themselves, and then there's other people who, you know, find their path to it and then embrace it all the way, and then, you know, there's just some people who just don't have it. What was it like for you, having been, you know, as you were saying, a ski bum and not really figuring it out? Like when somebody said, "Oh, you could be a brewer," what was it in your mind of saying, "Okay, I'm going to do this, but it's going to be my place," versus I'm going to do this and I'm going to, you know, clock in at somebody else's place?
Yeah, I mean, that was it was, for me, it was never even a question. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it my way. I don't know where that comes from. I mean, you know, as a young kid, and maybe into my early teens, before I kind of became less motivated in general, I always kind of approach things from more of an artistic side, I guess. And I think that maybe subconsciously it was this desire to be able to express myself as opposed to somebody else's ideas. I've generally been quite critical in the past about the way that people do things, for good and for bad, positively and negatively. And especially when I decided I was going to do this, I knew that I didn't want to, be Sam Calagione and just go get a Sabco system and start a business. Like I wanted to work in the trenches for 5 years or so, and really get a good grip on not the process itself, and not the ideas of building recipes and things like that, but more observe companies and be like, okay, they did that right. Okay, they did that right. Ooh, that, they slipped there, and I probably would have done this differently. And just try and amalgamate all those experiences so that I could at least come to the table with a I don't want to say with a purpose, but with a vision of what I think is going to work.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to be challenged. And I think I chose maybe a challenging path based on what we were speaking about before. Like we don't tend to really follow the trends here so much. I'm more inspired by those Michael Jackson books and things like that, and so we kind of follow that path, which sometimes I question the business decision in 2022 of going that way. But I've also seen a lot of musical acts, bands that, it takes them a while to kind of get popularity and get going, because they're really just holding true to their own values and not really trying to make the pop hit of the day. And I get inspired by those kinds of things as well.
That makes sense. So where's Tooth and Nail landed then with what you wanted it to be, Belgian wise, but also, I know you wanted to do each beer going to a specific dish and things like that. But in order to grow, where's Tooth and Nail wound up?
Where have we wound up? I mean, I don't think we've wound up yet.
Or where are you now, I guess, is probably the better way of phrasing that.
I think that this is, I look at this as a marathon for sure. And, for me, I remember when I guess it was just me at the time, I was putting together some of the first brews around here. And I always kind of went with this mantra, like don't try and reinvent the wheel right away. Let's just make a pale ale that tastes good. Make sure it's well fermented, make sure it's clean, make sure the carbonation is right, which is sometimes that fifth ingredient that people kind of drop the ball on. Make sure visually it's what you want, and body wise and mouthfeel, and bitterness is flavorful and not aggressive, and just all these things that I really think about in every glass of beer I have. Make sure that drinkability is there, so that these days the best compliment you ever get is somebody ordering a second pint of the same beer. And so that's kind of how I started doing the beers around here, and I guess I never really stopped. And so the portfolio has really, we've been coined as, the guy who does classic styles well. Well, I kind of argue that because a lot of our beers do actually not fit the mold of a classic style. But I think that keeping in mind those specific parameters of brewing and constructing and then deconstructing what is in the glass, that stuff I will always hold true. And once we get to the point where I'm satisfied with something, which is pretty much never, then it's time to maybe take a bite of something else. And after having worked at Lost Abbey and Cantillon, everybody expected me to come out of the gates and be making barrel aged sour beers that take 3 years to make. And I thought, no, that's kind of a future thing for me. If I'm going to do that, I want to do it right, and it's going to take all of this other experience to get there. And so I haven't really gone down that road yet. And I just, where do we sit now? I mean, I think we're well known for producing high quality beer, and that's all I really care about, to be honest. There's nothing more that matters to me than just a high, I think I heard it was 2 years ago, somebody did a video blog or something, and said they were talking about all these different breweries, and they said, I've never had a bad beer from Tooth and Nail. And that to me
No.
was the greatest pat on the back. Like that, nothing else matters to me, basically.
We spent a good couple of days hanging out at a tasting room in Toronto, going through. I don't know what our final tally was at the table, but it was a good amount of beer over the course
It was
of
over 100 anyway.
It was over 100, yeah, and different categories, and I was impressed that as a brewer, I always like it when brewers judge, because one, you're going to bring perspective that helps other folks in your profession, but it also, I imagine, helps you be a better brewer and think about things in different ways. What was your takeaway from the inaugural Canada Beer Cup sitting in that judges room?
My inaugural takeaway is I got to try harder. I think that's why I enjoy judging so much. I've been thinking about this a lot, and especially because, things have opened up a little bit. I'm getting out a little bit more. I've done a little bit more traveling, and I'm starting to remember why those experiences are important. But, I've got a 90-seat brew pub, a small little brewery in the back. We're capable of putting out a little bit of volume, but not a whole lot. But the walls are, it's 4 walls you work in every day, and in a trendy neighborhood in a government town, and you really get locked into that kind of room, that space where you become very focused on your own stuff. And I think getting out and judging really expands the mind a little bit and inspires, and for all the good beers and all the bad beers that you end up tasting, it really, I don't know, it really gives you, it lights a fire under your ass a little bit, and gets you thinking. And I think, I came back from that and chatted with the brewers in the back, and just told them all about the different experiences I had, that the excellent beers, the things that blew my mind, and then you're coming back into a space where people are working within that 4-walled space, and you're coming back with more passion, more enthusiasm. It's very positive. It's very uplifting for people. And then you kind of get out of that rut of the robotics of brewing every day, and start discussing future projects, and it fuels so much positivity.
I like that. Did you have conversations with other brewers after the fact? Because I know that this is a good way of giving feedback, and you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to get to, of just the beer has gotten better across the board, and that there used to just being like a handful of breweries that you would go to, and now there's more, but there's still ones that need improvement. Do you have conversations with brewers outside of judging that need improvement?
I've got a number of friends who, whenever we visit each other, we obviously try as many of each other's products as we can. And I'm always really quite honest about that stuff, unless there's, you don't really necessarily want to create some awkward situation. But my view is my friend's not going to get me to taste that unless they really want the hard truth on it. And so I'm pretty open with all of that. And I really hope that people come here and are the same, like I don't want people coming in all the time, friends traveling from afar who have breweries and stuff. And the comment is every time, "Oh man, the beer's great." I'm like, okay, well, that's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. But it's not all great. There's it's inevitably flawed somewhere along the line here. And maybe we've got 12 beers on tap, and 7 of them are great. But, I know which ones have problems. Maybe the customer coming in on a Saturday won't notice those kinds of things. But I don't love hearing that everything's great all the time. I kind of want to hear, hey, I taste this here, and have you thought of this? Right? Because we can all improve. And if you're not striving to constantly improve, I have no idea what the hell you're doing in this business, to be honest. And with competitions as well. I don't talk to a lot of people because there are a lot of my friends that choose not to compete, and I don't really get into too many conversations about why not. I think it's an individual choice, and half of us enjoy entering and half of us don't. Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Those that don't enter competitions, I probably won't bother, asking them a whole lot of stuff, and because I assume they don't want the feedback.
Yeah.
Every individual is different. People take feedback differently. Some people are offended. Some people find it encouraging, and that's just kind of human nature, I think.
I know everybody wants to win because that's one of the reasons that you enter the competition. But was there feedback that you got this year that you really took to heart?
Oh, a lot of it. Yeah. I'd been struggling a little bit with a yeast strain that I had been using, just kind of trying out and really trying to get to the bottom of it. And I had one of my beers come back where I didn't taste this before I sent it off, but with a little bit of age, you might be able to see how it could come out. And all 3 judges commented on some form of like almost a kielbasa taste on the finish, or it came to the forefront that potentially the yeast had autolyzed in the can, and 100% it would have. And it would have based on the struggles that I was having with that particular yeast strain. And so that comes back to me and confirms, even though I didn't taste that flavor when I sent the can off, it goes and confirms some of the fears I was having about using that yeast strain. And so it's been very helpful. I don't want to be this guy who's like, oh, what are you talking about? You must have gotten the wrong sample. It's like, no, it's like, you gotta take this feedback and use it. One of the reasons I enjoy entering competitions is for that reason. And, when we only had a handful of breweries that you'd really call high quality in Canada, we were traveling once a month to Buffalo or anywhere we could in the States to buy the beer down there because the quality was just so much better. I personally account that to the Great American Beer Festival. I mean, it is well known that it is an American state of mind to generally want to be the best and to strive to be the best at whatever it is that you're doing. And with the Great American Beer Festival, I mean, here are thousands of breweries that just want to win those medals. And so as a byproduct of that wanting to win, you just end up upping the quality across the board like tenfold.
I dig that. That's, yeah. Huh. So have you started making changes to that yeast strain now?
Yeah, I dropped it.
Okay.
I was playing around with it too, and I am, I don't really want to get too much into it because then I'll get all these texts going, well, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you tried this? I'm not actually interested in trying any of that right now, but
sure.
I was looking at replacing California ale with something that had a little bit more character to it. And the thing about using California ale yeast, it is so robust and it's so hardy and it can handle a lot of different environments and produce an incredibly clean beer. So I don't mind playing around with a couple of things, but if I start to find it too challenging, I'll go back to what works.
Yeah. And that's, there's something to be said. And that kind of goes back to tradition and everything of just what's reliable. And what's been proven.
Brewery.
Yeah.
I mean, it was California ale yeast and German lager yeast. And I'm like, well, I know they work. I know they make clean beers. I know that I can express myself through those yeasts and they don't need to dictate, the beer that comes out. I know that if I learn them and understand them the way that I try to learn and understand my children, that I will be able to work with them and we can have a relationship together going forward. And I don't mind trying other things out because there's always a better way. But if you get to the point where it's not a better way, go back to what works, and then, down the road, maybe try something else.
Yeah.
But always just trying to look to improve what's in the glass. And even with brands, I mean, that's the fortunate thing about a brew pub is you can kind of play around a little bit, if some of these beers were in a production setting, then I'd be trying all these things out on a pilot system. But to put out a 15 barrel batch of something, that might have a different yeast strain or change the hop or something like that, we get instant feedback from the customers in the bar. So I think it's actually pretty beneficial to do that.
Let me ask you about the brew pub and the relationship between beer and food. And you were, again, I was sort of struck by this idea of having, a menu, set menu with beers to match, which that speaks to my own heart. What's been the evolution of beer and food pairing since 2015 when you opened?
Well, I should preface this by saying that we don't really have a full kitchen at Tooth and Nail. We do sandwiches and snacks and just try and have something available for people to drink more beer. I think personally that the interest in beer and food pairing has waned since 2015. Especially when I was working at Beer Bistro, it was all I could think about. And that was, 2008, probably. And into brewing school in 2010. And then a few years beyond that, it was this huge thing that occupied the space in my mind. A lot of conversations that I had with chefs and with brewers, and, beer dinners were really quite a big thing. And now it just seems like that's not really on the top of people's minds anymore, which I think is too bad. I don't know if that's a pandemic thing or not. I think it maybe started to wane a little bit before that. But those experiences are incredible. They're a great way to, for example, I get so many people in here that tell me about how much they dislike Belgian beer. And I say, well, that's you're kind of painting that with one big stroke here. Like, let's break this down. You don't like Hogarden. Oh, okay. Well, it goes a little bit beyond that.
Yeah.
But that Hogarden flavor is what people associate with Belgian beer. And so I will always say, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to have, a saison with maybe 3 different cheeses. And go from that starting point of trying to marry that maybe not so familiar flavor of a Belgian yeast strain with food that works with it. And it's like the people who Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is too hoppy for them in the beginning, and 6 months later they're like, what's the biggest triple IPA you have?
Right.
It's that acquiring that taste. It's like becoming accustomed to the fact that beer can be those other flavors as well, but sometimes it just takes that little push, and I think food is really the way to do it.
I agree.
Trying to create those experiences for people seems like, I say it seems challenging right now. Maybe it's an open slate. Maybe it's like a blank canvas that we can build upon again, and maybe start, getting people interested all over again in the world beer styles that I had been referring to earlier.
Yeah. What about seasonality with beer? I was poking around your website beforehand and noticed you have an autumn lager. There's still a summer pale up there. How much does seasonality play into the creation of the beers that you're putting out there?
Well, I'll answer that in 2 ways. The first way is that I generally do brew quite seasonally. The second part of that is that will be the last time I actually put the name of a season on the label of a beer. Because the second the summer's over, nobody's interested in a summer pale ale. And, that beer, for example, we brewed toward the end of the summer because the demand was so big for it. But then the second it became September 1st, nobody bought it. So I think I'm done putting the names of seasons on things. But we generally do really keep a lot of our beer under 5% alcohol in the summer. And then we start creeping up in the fall and then even higher in the winter. I think it's important. I mean, is it important that I don't sell an imperial stout in the summer? No, that doesn't matter. People will probably buy it. But I just think that our bodies, the second the leaves start falling, we're making stews at home and things like that. I don't think that's because we read about them in a book. I think it's our natural kind of tendency to do so. And so, bringing out, brown ales and alt beers and things like that, which I have yet to do either of those, so I don't know why I mentioned them. But those styles of beer tend to come about better in the fall and do better in the fall. And this autumn lager we released, that was a pretty cool project with Lallemand Yeast experimenting with a new product that they have, and it's adding a little bit more of a robust flavor in there for the cooler weather. Like, I dig it. I think it's great. But calling things seasonals, I'm starting to get away from that a little bit.
I like that subconsciously you're bringing up styles that you haven't made yet. I feel like they're
all the ones I want to make.
I was going to say that's it's time to get back into the brew house and
for sure. But running a pub too, it's you get challenged in doing that kind of stuff because there are two customers you have to answer every day, and one of them is, hey, why are you out of Vim and Vigor, your Pilsner right now? And the other question is, what's brand new this week? And I think I can't have certain beers available all the time for the customers that want those brands and still be releasing new products all the time. It's an impossible thing. So you try and manage that, and you try and do your best and offer something new, whether you're putting one of your brands on cask on a Friday night to try and drum up some excitement. Our Pilsner that we're known for, I do it unfiltered on Sundays every week now, and things like that. And then just try and come up with we've got a few beers now that we've done annually, but now it's expected and anticipated that we'll do them, which is great. It's just doing a beer annually. You can go back in your notes and like, okay, what did I like? What didn't I like? How do we recreate it? It's tough unless you're brewing things on a regular basis to keep it somewhat consistent, and the variability year to year can sometimes be an attraction to it too. So
I've been asking folks, I'm getting mindful of time, but I've been asking folks on the show for a while now the green door question, which is, there's this television show called The Good Place, and in the final season they introduced the concept of a green door that you can walk through and be anywhere at any point in time, doing whatever you want to be doing. And so if we had such a door on our plane of existence and this conversation ended and you could walk through it and be in any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
Wow. That's a great question. I'm so tempted to just recreate some experience that I've had already, but I kind of don't believe in that a lot of the time, because the second time you do something like that, it's never quite as good as the first.
Yeah.
What would be awesome? I think it'd be pretty cool to wake up on a dreary autumn day in London and go to the White Horse and drink a bunch of cask beer with Sunday roast, and followed by a few different vintages of J.W. Lee's or something like that. Start with some nice cask bitters and finish with some barley wines on a whole day on a Sunday around a big table with some food. Be pretty amazing. Who would I have there? I think I'd probably invite everyone I ever worked with, or worked for, I should say. Sitting down with all the different people who influenced me and inspired me, or hired me for that matter, would be pretty interesting. And I think you get some heated discussions at the table too, which could That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, especially when the barley wines hit.
Sure.
That's
I don't know where I
awesome.
came up with that, but that's just where I went right now.
I love it. Your subconscious is working hard these days. That's
Maybe. Yeah.
I dig it. Well, Matt, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for doing this, and it was a real pleasure judging with you and hanging out in Toronto.
Yeah.
I hope we get a chance to do it again soon.
Oh, we'll have to for sure. No, thanks for inviting me on. It's totally an honor to be on the podcast. So,
What's a winter seasonal you're looking forward to? Let me know by emailing John Holl, that's JOHNHOLL, at allaboutbeer.com, or you can share with me on Twitter at John_Holl. All About Beer is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can just follow along at All About Beer. And of course, This Week in Rauch Beer is also online. The Facebook group is easy to search, and on Twitter and Instagram, it's at TW Rauch Beer. We're able to bring you this show each week thanks to the companies that want to support independent journalism in the beer space. If you'd like to learn more about our surprisingly affordable rates, please reach out to info@allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of that, this episode is brought to you by Pro Brewer. We're bringing original articles to probrewer.com twice a week, covering issues that are important to the beer industry and aimed at helping breweries of all sizes understand the different facets of the business. Check out our articles on probrewer.com every Tuesday and Thursday, and visit the site daily for other original content and to stay connected with the beer industry. Finally, just a reminder that All About Beer has a podcast channel now. You can search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And go visit allaboutbeer.com. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.